nice to see you. Yeah, so I'm Chris. Let me share a little bit of family news. We weren't here last Sunday, and it's so good to be back to just worship together with you all. It's great, just that time of worship. So, some of you might remember that in July we put out a job advert because we are looking to employ a new operations administrator, coordinator type person. And I'm pleased to let you know we have had a successful applicant, and that lady is a wonderful lady called Rachel May. She's not here this week, and yeah, she's brilliant, fantastic, really great interview, and we're really looking forward to just, increasing the staff team. So that's now me and Stuart, Deborah and Rachel all work for the church in different kind of lengths of time throughout the week. From September, and I think it's just going to bless us as we just, grow and go into the future and expand all the different things that we want to do. So do encourage her. She's off on holiday at the moment, and so we're just going to encourage her. And yeah, I think it's a good thing to be thanking God for in this season. So let me get some Bibles. These are to do that. We're going to be in Judges chapter 4 for our story today. And it'll be good for you to have the Bible passage open. So if you stick your hand up in the air, then the Bible will come to you. Just keep it up, it will arrive to you. And I'm going to do a little bit of intro spiel. So you can try to find it whilst I do that. But it's Judges chapter 4. I can tell you, in fact, if you've got a church Bible, it's on page 166. So, when I was younger, and in fact even now, my favourite superhero is Superman. He's just clearly the best, because he can fly. Josh is like shaking his head. He can fly. I bet Josh likes Batman, so he's not even a real superhero. He's just a rich guy with lots of good gadgets. Anyway, Superman. He can fly, he can see through things, he can do all sorts of amazing things. And when I was younger, obviously his name was Clark Kent, and lots of people call him CK. My name is Chris Kimbangi, and so I just encourage people to call me CK, so I want to be like CK. And apart from the skin colour, I can assure you, I'm not Superman in lots of different ways. But when around 13 or 14 years old, I went to opticians and I suddenly needed glasses. This was a big day for me. And if I was ever feeling like I needed a bit of bravery, I would just take off my glasses and face the day, whatever it needed to be. I just love Superman. I've watched every single different type of superhero, Superman movie or series, you can tell. I even watched the most recent BBC One, Series 2, good one. Yeah, a few fans out there. And the thing about Clark Kent, Superman, is that he gets sent to this earth by his Kryptonian parents, because they used to live, they don't know, in Krypton. That blew up. They sent him to this earth, and he, as a baby, and as he grew up, he had to learn about all his gifts that he had. And I guess the real question in those early years is he going to use all his gifts he's got for his own benefit or for the benefit of others? And there's this moment where he ends up finding this place called the Fortress, which is where his virtual kind of parents from Krypton teach him about his identity. And he goes there and discovers why he was sent to this earth, to be a beacon of hope, which that bit on his chest that everyone thinks is an S, it's not an S. It means hope in Kryptonian language. And it's a symbol. Anyway, that he was sent to bring, love it. He was sent to bring hope to this earth. And so once he discovers his identity, he then uses his gifts, and he develops in his gifts. And then once he's got his identity, he's got all his gifts, does he then sit at home, playing PlayStation, Xbox? No. He then goes out into the world, and he uses, from his identity, uses gifts for good, for all that he's been called to do. And he still gets a normal job. He works for the Daily Planet as a news reporter. And he even gets married. And he has kids. And you can latest series is all about kids growing up, they're teenagers. They develop powers as well, exciting. Being a parent, trying to look after kids who develop powers. Anyway. And so he does all the normal stuff of life, all the good stuff of life, and yet, still, he knows his purpose, he knows his calling, he uses gifting to go out into the world to do good. And I think it's a helpful reminder because sometimes as Christians, we also are given an identity. We learn it from our Heavenly Father in heaven. And He gives us wonderful gifts. Every single one of us gives. He gives. And He doesn't give begrudgingly, but gives willingly. And He gives generously. And He wants to fill each of us, to all of us to know our identity, to know our gifts. But not to then sit on our hands and feet, but actually to step out into the world and to do good. And so in the Bible we have two key things that come up often. It's the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. The Great Commandment being love God with all the heart, mind, soul and strength, and love others as yourself. And the Great Commission, go out into the world, share the good news with all people, make disciples of all nations. There is an identity to receive and action to be taken. And so this morning we're going to go through the Bible of two amazing women, some of the most amazing women that you'll find in the Bible, who, even in the face of all the kind of blokes around them being absolute wimps and wet fish, and not stepping out in their identity, these two women, they step out in faith. They know their identity in God. They know the promises that God has spoken over His people, that this God that we've been talking about, that we know about. And they don't just sit on their hands and knees, but they take action. They take steps of faith. And as a church, actually, the Great Commission, the Great Commandment, we've dissected those into three statements. So the Great Commission is love the Lord, the Great Commandment, love the Lord your God with heart, mind, strength, and spirit. So we call it building family. It's all about discipleship. It's why we do Sundays. It's why we do life groups. It's why we make sure we want to strengthen and help each other grow in our love and faith of God. We've got the Great Commission, which is going out and telling people about Jesus. So that we call that sharing Jesus with others. And then the second part of the Great Commandment was also love others as you have yourself. So we call that helping others. Building family, sharing Jesus, helping others. If you don't know what your calling is from God in life to do, some people have a specific calling. But everyone has a calling to love God, to love others, and to share Jesus. And so I'm hoping that by the end of today, women, you will be encouraged again by these two wonderful women, Deborah and Jael, to step out to all that God's calling you. And men, you will also be fully encouraged by these wonderful women, Deborah and Jael, to take action, to step out, to not be like the wet fish that we find in the story, like those blokes who sit around, who compromise, who dabble with sin, who let the enemy take hold in different areas of their life, but instead are strong and courageous to step forward. Does that make sense? That's where we're going. So we're going to read the story, and then I'm going to put out three quick things. Before we read the story, though, there are a bunch of different characters in the story, which as you read through the first time, it's difficult to track. So what I want to do is I'm going to just talk about each of those characters, so we've got a brief bit of context, and then we'll go into the story. And I asked my friend George to draw a picture, which he did. Hey, this on the whiteboard for me in one actually, just before I get there, let me say one thing. So, yeah. Oh,
hold on, it'll come back.
Okay, alright. So basically, we're in Judges, okay? And so far, for the people of God, you had like Joseph who went down into Egypt, a guy called Moses raised up. He said, let my people go into Pharaoh, brings them out of Egypt, and they cross over the Red Sea, they go into the kind of desert 40 years under a guy called Moses, and then the leader called Joshua comes along, he leads them into the promised land. So there's Joshua in the top right. He leads them across the Jordan River into the promised land. And one of the first places they take is Jericho. They march around the walls of Jericho, and then that falls down. And then they also take this place called Hazel. So one of the earliest places that is taken is this place called Hazel. And one of the tribes of Israel is called the Naphtalites, or Naphtali, and they are given that part of the promised land. So the Naphtali are meant to own that bit of land, they're meant to reside there, to be fruitful, to multiply, to know God's love and grace with them. And what happens is over time, so Joshua dies, and then you go into this period of Judges. And basically the book of Judges is like these cycles where the people of God, they kind of go away from God. They stop loving Him. They stop doing the whole Great Commandment, Great Commission stuff. Stop serving Him. Stop having Him as their king and their love of their life. So they go into evil practices. They start mixing with the other people that are in the land. And some of these people get into all sorts of horrendous kind of sexual immorality, idol worship, all sorts of horrendous things. And then what happens is that a judge is raised up. So this is a person who remembers the word of God and comes and says, hey, come on, we need to stand on the promise of God, we need to remember Him. And then the people, they kind of rally to that call, they remember God, they start worshipping Him again, and then God delivers them from that current kind of evil mess, and they have some peace in the land, and then they have a bit of time of peace, and then they go back into evil practices, they start messing up again and worshipping God. That kind of cycle goes round and round and round. And so, we're in the chapter we're about to read, so Joshua's taken the land. Naphtali is now ruled by a guy called Barak, who's at the bottom of the Naphtali picture. So Barak is the leader of the Naphtalites, and as someone who was one of the first Israelite clans to enter in, as his ancestors were one of the first Israelite clans to enter in, he should know about God's promises on his people. But he ends up basically allowing a guy called King Jael, which is at the top left, to come in and reside in the land. So that place that Joshua took over, Jericho and Hazor, is now given back to the enemy. They start rebuilding the walls, they start rebuilding the city of Hazor, and they now reside in that kind of green, stripy bit. So King Jabin, he has a commander of the army who leads his armies forward, and his name is Sisera. So you've got Sisera's army, and Sisera is actually the character on the bottom left, which has got the shield that kind of looks like a surfboard. And he is fist pumping a guy called Heber, because Heber is a Keithanite, and Heber, he lives in Naphtali, but he's kind of disowned his people. He's a bit of a traitor. And so Heber basically ends up kind of saying to Sisera and his army and to King Jael, hey, if you're ever in trouble, don't worry, come to my place. I'll give you safe passage, I'll protect you, you'll be alright. Heber is married to Jael. Jael, amazing woman of God, loves God, knows God's promises, thinks her husband's like a numpty. She is willing, even though he's not, she is willing to stand on the promise of God. So we're going to read about her in a minute. And in amongst all of this, the person who God has raised up to remind the people of God, come on, stop messing around, is this wonderful woman called Deborah, who comes along, who loves God, knows her identity in God. She's got some great gifts. She's an incredible woman, actually. She's a singer, she's a songwriter, she's a poet, she's a warrior, and now she's been called on to be a judge to help to settle disputes between the people in the land. Is that enough background? You understand the different characters? Okay. Let's read. Here we go. Verse 1, chapter 4. It's going to come up. I might forget to do this, so Jesse maybe will Jean maybe want to click on for me. Right, so verse 1, chapter 4. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So there's that cycle starting. Did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Now that Ehud was dead, Ehud was one of the good guys who ended up killing one of the old kings by stabbing him in his gut. And he was so fat that the sword was wrapped around his stomach, and his stomach swallowed it. You can read that in chapter 3. Anyway, chapter 4, so Ehud's now dead, and so the Israelites are now doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor, where he shouldn't have been in the first place. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim, because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. So then now they cry out for the Lord. There are 20 years of pain and distress. They've not been going with God. Now they're going to start crying out to God. Just to mention that the whole 900 chariots fitted with iron, that is like the super weapon of the day. That's like your Tomahawk missiles and your kind of stealth planes. It's like all the best that the army could have at that time, they have. So verse 4. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapido, was leading Israel at the time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. She sent for Barak, son of Abinadab of Kadesh in Naphtali. So she's like calling for the king, and she says to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to the mount to Tabor. I will then lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River." So she's going to get them to follow her. And then once I've done that, to the Kishon River, I'll give him into your hands. So just to pause, that 10,000 people is actually not many, but Deborah is a woman who knows, hey, if God is for us, he can be against us. And 10,000 is enough because God is the one who's called us to be in this place, and I'm trusted in his promises. So then, Barak, because it's a bit of a worse, well, if you go with me, Deborah, I will go. But if you don't go, I won't go. That's what it sounds like. I haven't been for it. And she says, yeah, certainly, I will go with you. I'll encourage you, that's what she said to Deborah. But because of the course that you are taking, the honour will not be yours. For the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. So she's not saying it be herself, but she's saying she's prophesying how a woman is going to do this. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. There, Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali and the 10,000 men, so he's doing as she says, and they went up under his command, and Deborah also went with them. Now Heber, remember Heber, this time in Sisera? He, the Kenite, left the other Kenites, because he's a traitor, the descendants of Hope, Moses' brother-in-law, and he pitched his tent by a great tree in Zanaim near Kadesh. And when they told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinadab, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River all his men and his 900 chariots fitted with iron. And so Deborah goes to Barak, because Barak, he needs his encouragement. So she's going to him again. Go! This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? It's like a real good encouragement. So Barak, he went down Mount Tabor with the 10,000 men following him. And at Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and the army by the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. I'm just going to pause. In chapter 5, Deborah then basically retells the story but in song form. And she sings about it, so she kind of recounts parts of it. And in chapter 20, in verse 20 of chapter 5, we find out that it says, "From the heavens the stars fought, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon, so march on and be strong." And basically what a lot of theologians that are much wiser than me tell me is that, so Baal, who the people used to worship, the enemy, is the god of the storms. And so our God, the God of the Bible, he then defeats their army by bringing a great storm and wiping them out. I think it's amazingly ironic, He shows how I'm the real God of storm, and I'll show you how it's done. And he takes them out. Let's carry on. So Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth-Hagoyim. All of Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was there. Sisera, meanwhile, he fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because he knows he can find rest there. Because, it says, there was an alliance between Jael, king of Hazor, and the family of Heber the Kenite. So Jael, she went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Hey, come on, Lord, come away, don't be afraid, come in." So he entered the tent, and she covered him with a blanket, and he said, "Well, I'm thirsty, please give me some water." She opened the skin of milk, she gave him a drink. It's like milk and cookies, here you go. She covered him up, and then he says, "Hey, can you stand in the doorway of the tent, and if someone comes by and asks you, is there anyone in there, just say no." But Jael remembers the promise of God, mighty woman of God. Instead, it says, Heber's wife Jael picked up a tent peg, and she got a hammer, and she went quietly to him, and while he lay fast asleep and exhausted, she drove that tent peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. What a woman. Just then, Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, looking for him, and Jael went out to meet him and says, "Hey, come, I'll show you the man you're looking for." And so he went with her, and there lay Sisera with a tent peg through his temple, dead. On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin the king until they were destroyed. And right at the end of chapter 5, it says, "And the land had peace for 40 years." These amazing women, in the face of all the kind of their contemporaries, the men around them, messing around, compromising, allowing the enemy to take places, take strongholds in the promised land, they step up and say, "No, come on. God has promised this land to us. God has made his promises, and he will keep his promises. But we, the people of God, have a part to play in it." That's what I say, hey, and we need to remember first to love God, to live for him, to trust him, but also we don't just sit on our hands, we don't just have these gifts for no reason. We need to take action. Loving God and taking action is what all Christians are called to do. We're not called to sit around on our hands and feet, but actually we're called to do stuff in the world. And the Bible gives us all sorts of different things that we can do, all sorts of great things that we can do, and you can read about it, you can discover how you're called to love your family, how you're called to love your neighbours, how you're called to give to the poor, as you're called to help others, as you're called to build the church, the kingdom of God, as you're called to be part of the community, as you're called to pray for people, to care for the sick and the dying and the hurting. There's all sorts of things we can do, and it's all summarised in loving the word of God, loving others, helping them, and sharing Jesus. And the three key things I just want to put out from these amazing women are these three. The first one is obedience. They're obedient. Deborah heard God's voice, and she was willing to share it with Barak. She wasn't afraid to do that. She summoned him, she called him to her call. And it's so easy sometimes when God is telling us stuff, encouraging us to do stuff, to kind of give into the fear. And I believe God has encouraged us to faith. Come on, let's be obedient to him, to his call, to what he's saying to us, to step out into those things that he's called us to. Deborah was unique in that not only she led by example, but she was bold and assertive, and she was obedient in both her personal and her public life. Deborah's calling as a judge was not her sole occupation. She was also a wife as well. She was a warrior, she was a prophetess, like I mentioned, she was a songwriter, and she's faithful, she's proved faithful in all of them. And we're called to do the same. I mentioned Superman earlier. He did the same. He was a faithful husband, faithful, good father, good at work, but also he went on and used the gifts that he was given to do the things that he was called to do from his identity. We're called to do the same. God has given each of us an identity, and we're called to obedience. And I wonder, how will you do it? How's your obedience towards the Lord? What's he been speaking to you about that you've been putting off? What's he been encouraging you to get rid of, to move out of the way that you've held back from? Where has he encouraging you to take ground? They gave up ground, that picture. Barak gave up ground to the enemy. I wonder, where are you giving ground in your life? Where are you allowing the enemy to take a step, take a foothold? What are you allowing him, or what are you giving him to? What are you allowing him to store up? Is it hatred, anger, jealousy, addiction? Where are you allowing him to take ground? God calls us to be obedient, to put him first, to love him, to live for him, to serve him. And not just in our public areas of life, not just our workplaces, but in our private areas as well. Be obedient throughout the whole day, 24/7. Deborah and Jael were obedient to God. There's many people that are obedient. The second thing is they had courage. And they took courage not from their own skills or gifting, but from God's promises. Deborah knew the word of God. She knew all the story, all that happened from Moses taking them out of Egypt, through the waters, into the desert, Joshua taking them to the promised land. All those words like be strong, be courageous. Don't be afraid, because God is with you. He's not going to leave you or forsake you. And she remembered that. And the blokes around her, they didn't. They forgot it. They were like, oh, that'll be alright. Let's just leave them there. No. It's not enough. We need to be courageous people. And that's what she did. She was bold and courageous for God's glory. Leaders lead. And Barak wasn't doing that. So Deborah stepped in and said, no, come on. And she didn't pass the buck. In fact, and also though, she didn't ran like roughshod over Barak either. She got alongside him. She encouraged, hey, you play your part. Come on, you can do this. She just gave him encouragement. Come on, don't forget, God is with you. So surely he's given them into your hands. And so she encouraged him, but also she wasn't saying, well, you go and do it and I'll sit back here. She's like, no, I'll come as well. As a leader, she was willing to go where she was encouraging Barak to go. I think that about myself. Every week, I get the joy of preaching, it's wonderful. But every week, the first person I'm preaching to is myself. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what areas in my life do I need to make sure that I'm obedient to God? What areas in my life do I take courage and step forward in? And I want to encourage you to do the same. We all need to do it, because we're all the flock of God's sheep. Right, the sheep of God's flock. He is the high shepherd. He is the king. And we're all trying to follow him and serve him faithfully. In whatever areas he's called us to. For some people it's leading worship. For some people it's preaching. For some people it's leading life. For some people it's just being faithful to their husband or wife, or to their kids, or it's just serving in their workplace. It's just loving God and loving others around them. Whatever it doesn't matter. Everyone is called to be courageous in the areas that God's called them to. And in order to do that, we need the Holy Spirit, don't we? We need the Holy Spirit. We can't do it in our own strength. But even in our weakness, we can be strong, because we know that God is with us. She modelled amazing obedience, but also willingness to speak truth, to stand on her courage, and to take action. And I think that's amazing. The third thing that she does, so let's have courage. Let's be obedient, let's have courage. And then lastly, let's also have conviction. So she has conviction about what God would say. She didn't waver in her faith. And we might not always know what the road looks like ahead. We might not always know what the twists and turns will be to come. In fact, no one ever does, because we don't live in the future. We live in the present. But we can be sure that God will faithfully guide us and lead us in the way. And she had conviction that God was going before them, that God had called them to this. And I want us to believe, as a church, we should have conviction that God has called us to love him, to love others, to share Jesus. It's all we're called to do. It's all we need to do. Great command, great commission. Imagine our church if we did that, all of us together, loving God, being obedient, casting our sin, stepping into all He's called us to, stepping out in our gifts, trusting actually that He's a good giver of these gifts that He's given us. And I believe we'll continue to see, as we have done, lives transformed in us and amongst us and around us. First our own, then those in our church and in our community. Deborah's courage is legendary, but her confidence didn't come from her abilities or in Israel's puny army that were outnumbered physically by numbers, but also by the super weapons of the day. Jacob, he trusted in the things of this world. But Deborah and Jael trusted in God. They trusted in God's power, in God's provision, knowing that God was not only for Israel, but had gone before them, was all the strength that she needed to take action, to get the job done, to inspire others. Hey, we can have that too. God is with us. He's for us. He's not against us. He's gone before us. He's there. We heard last week from Stuart, who talked from Acts 17, and there's that great verses that we also were reminded from in the series about loving people towards Jesus, that God has set us in the boundaries, in the context, with the people around us, that they might come to know the Lord through us. You live and you reside and you work and you study in the exact place that God has called you to. And the people around you, those people in your sphere of influence, you can trust that God has placed there to interact with you, to know His light. But sometimes we forget that, don't we? We just go about, we get to Monday and we just go about our day. I'm half uneasy to as well. I get to know people in my neighbourhood, in my street, and play football with them and see someone just go about and forget, actually I'm there to do them good, to shine Jesus the light, to love them, to care for them, to get alongside them, to serve them, but also to share with them about Jesus and all that He's done in our lives. And no matter how we do that, what steps we take them to do those things. Yeah. So the Great Commission, they go hand in hand. All of these things, we need the power of the Holy Spirit. We can't do it ourselves. We need the power of the Holy Spirit. And so, what I want to do is invite the worship team back up. But what I'd ask is, David's just going to play quietly. And we're going to stand. I'm going to encourage you, even if you're here for the first time, it's all right. For the second follower, just to kind of get into small groups, just around there, 3s or 4s. And I was trying to encourage you to pray for one another. If you feel comfortable in what even just lay a hand on one another. And if you don't want to, it's fine, really relaxed. You don't have to pray out loud, but maybe 1 or 2 in your group will. And just pray that the Holy Spirit will fill each and every one of us. That whatever God has been speaking to us about through this story, these 2 wonderful women, that He will impart something of their character, their nature into our lives. Whether that's obedience, whether that's courage, whether it's conviction, knowing that God is good, He is real, He's for us. So no one can be against us. Nothing can separate us from His love. Nothing. It's incredible. I just want to encourage you just to pray. Pray truth. We've been singing truth. We might pray truth just on each other. Lay your hands and just ask God to fill people with His Spirit, to give them courage, to give them strength,